Our eyes and experience tell us the earth is flat and motionless, and everything in the sky revolves around us. But when we cease to believe our own eyes and experience, we have to prostrate ourselves at the feet of these very pseudoscientists who are blinding us, treat them as experts, astronomical priests who have special knowledge only they can access, like the Hubble telescope. So by brainwashing us of something so gigantic and fundamental, it actually makes every other kind of lesser indoctrination a piece of cake. Earth being the flat, fixed center of the universe around which everything in the heavens revolves gives a special importance and significance not only to Earth, but to us humans, the most intelligent among the intelligent designers' designs. By turning Earth into a spinning ball thrown around the sun and shot through infinite space from a godless Big Bang, they turn humanity into a random, meaningless, purposeless accident of a blind, dumb universe. So it's like trauma-based mind control, beating the divinity out of us with their mental manipulations.
Hello and welcome to the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba. And those of you who have been listening to this show for a while now, you know that whenever I play that intro, I'm going to be talking about some sort of conspiracy, right? Now, of course, I extended this one a bit to include some quotes from a guy named Eric Dubay and a clip from the movie Men in Black as sort of a setup for the discussion that we're about to have this evening. My guest tonight is Mark Sargent, and let me just say, if what he has to say is true, this topic may be the mother who gave birth to the mother of all conspiracies. I mean, you know me, I love a good conspiracy, but this one, I have to be honest, I didn't even want to look into it. Frankly, I still don't want to look into it. But it has been said that condemnation before investigation is the height of ignorance. Now, I may be stupid, but I does try not to be ignorant, if you know what I mean. You've heard me say it many times before. I consider myself to be a researcher, right? But by that I mean I research that which has been searched by others before me. As a result, I found myself changing my opinions about a great many things, many of which have landed me in the tinfoil hat-wearing corner of heretics, because my current views on a variety of topics are different from the mainstream view now. Oh well, so be it. All I can say is I am not trying to win any popularity contest. I'm on a quest for truth. Simple as that. I want to know what the truth is. And the only way we can find the truth is to test everything. Well, as a born-again believer in Yeshua or Jesus Christ, I was always raised to test everything by the scriptures. Okay, great. So how does this whole idea of a round globe test out when we look through the scriptures? Well, actually, guys, it turns out it doesn't test out so good, actually. Okay, people use Isaiah 40, verse 22 to support the globe theory, or what some would say is fact or reality. They'll say Isaiah 40:22. It says, "It is he that sitteth upon the circle of the earth. See, it proves it's round. And the inhabitants thereof are as grasshoppers, and stretcheth out the heavens as a curtain, and spreadeth them out as a tent to dwell in." Well, it doesn't sound, now think about that. Think about an enclosed, let's say flat surface under a tent. Now, when we look at that word circle, the Hebrew word there is chug, or chug, depending how you want to pronounce it, Strong's number 2329, which implies something circular. It does not mean round as in a ball or a sphere. There are other scriptures which use the same word, chug or hug or chug, however you want to pronounce it, as a circle and not as a ball or sphere. And those scriptures might include Proverbs 8:27. "When he established the heavens, I was there when he inscribed a circle on the face of the deep." Did he put a globe on the face of the deep? I don't know. Job 26:10. "He has inscribed a circle on the surface of the waters, at the boundary of light and darkness." Again, it seems to be arguing in favor of an enclosed flat earth theory to me. Job 22:14. "Clouds veil him so that he cannot see as he walks on the circle of the sky." Those are all passages that use the exact same word in reference to a circle, not a ball. Whereas the Hebrew word for ball is dur, Strong's number 1754, and interestingly enough, it's used in the book of Isaiah also. In Isaiah 29:18, it says, "He will surely violently turn and toss thee like a ball into a large country." So circle does not equal ball or sphere in Hebrew any more than it does in English. We've been taught the Earth is spinning, and thus its surface at the equator moves at a speed of roughly 1,000 miles per hour. And we're told that the Earth is zooming around the Sun at about 67,000 miles per hour. In addition, our solar system, Earth and all, supposedly whirls around the center of our galaxy at some 490,000 miles per hour. But there are a number of scriptures describing the Earth as being fixed and not moving. 1 Chronicles 16:30, he has fixed the earth firm, immovable. Psalm 93:1, thou hast fixed the earth immovable and firm. Psalm 96:10, he has fixed the earth firm, immovable. Psalm 104:5, thou didst fix the earth on its foundation, a globe on a foundation, so that it never can be shaken. Isaiah 45:18, who made the earth and fashioned it and himself fixed it fast. Some try to say that just means the earth is made the way God wants it. See, he fixed it up and that's the way he wants it, and he placed it where he wants it, and it's not going to move from there. Okay, that may be one way to read it, but what if we just accepted what it says literally at face value? Then we have the whole issue of the so-called corners and the ends of the earth, right? We have scriptures like Job 37:3. He directeth it under the whole heaven, and his lightning under the ends of the earth. Job 38:13. That it might take hold of the ends of the earth, that the wicked might be shaken out of it. Isaiah 11:12. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Isaiah 43:6. I'll say to the north, give them up, and to the south, don't keep them back. Bring my sons from far away, and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Matthew 24:31. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Revelation 7:1. And after these things I saw four angels standing on the four corners of the earth, holding the four winds of the earth, that the winds should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. Revelation 28. He will go out to deceive Gog and Magog, the nations at the four corners of the earth, and gather them for war. They are as numerous as the sands of the seashore. And whether or not you consider it to be scripture, if you at least accept that the book of Enoch has some measure of credibility, well, then you're going to see this concept described in even more detail. As many of you know, I published a book called Genesis and the Synchronized Biblically Endorsed Extra-Biblical Texts a couple of years ago. It, of course, includes the entire book of First Enoch. And in the introduction of this big volume, I wrote that I was gonna create a sort of a standalone version of the Book of Enoch. Just put out an edition just of the Book of Enoch with notes and commentary. Well, as I began working on that, I found that from about chapter 17 forward or so, you find some really interesting descriptions of heaven and earth, which, well, they sound a whole lot like a flat/enclosed earth model. Let's go to 1 Enoch 18. I saw the treasures of all the winds. I saw how he had furnished them with the whole creation and the firm foundations of the earth. And I saw the cornerstone of the earth. I saw the four winds which bear the earth and the firmament of the heavens. And I saw how the winds stretch out the vaults of heaven and have their station between heaven and earth. These are the pillars of heaven. I saw the winds of heaven which turn and bring the circumference of the sun and all the stars to their setting. I saw the winds on the earth carrying the clouds. I saw the paths of the angels. I saw at the end of the earth the firmament of the heaven above. And I proceeded, and I saw a place which burns day and night, where there are 7 mountains of magnificent stones, 3 toward the east and 3 towards the south. And as for those towards the east, one was of colored stone, and one of and one of pearl, and one of jacinth, and those towards the south of red stone. But the middle one reached to heaven like the throne of God, of alabaster, and the summit of the throne was of sapphire. And I saw a flaming fire, and beyond these mountains is a region, the end of the great earth. There the heavens were completed. And I saw a deep abyss with columns of heavenly fire, and among them I saw columns of fire fall, which were beyond measure alike towards the height and towards the depth. And beyond that abyss, I saw a place which had no firmament of the heaven above and no firmly founded earth beneath it. There was no water upon it and no birds, but it was a waste and horrible place. First Enoch 21 verses 1 and 2. And I proceeded to where things were chaotic, and I saw there something horrible. I saw neither a heaven above nor a firmly founded earth, but a place chaotic and horrible. First Enoch 23:1. From thence I went to another place to the west of the ends of the earth. And this is kind of gets into I forget his last name. Anyway, another guy who's a flat earther guy, kind of his theory. First Enoch 33, beginning in verse 1. And from thence I went to the ends of the earth and saw there great beasts, and each differed from the other. And I saw birds also differing in appearance and beauty and voice, and one differing from the other. And to the east of those beasts I saw the ends of the earth whereon the heaven rests, and the portals of the heaven open. And I saw how the stars of heaven come forth, and I counted the portals out of which they proceed, and wrote down all their outlets of each individual star by itself, according to their number and their names, their courses and their positions, and their times and their months, as Uriel, the holy angel who was with me, showed me. He showed all things to me, and wrote them down for me. Also their names he wrote for me, and their laws and their companies. Okay, so we have all these scriptures talking about the ends of the earth, corners of the earth. The earth is fixed, it's not moving, described as a circle. We got the Book of Enoch, whatever you think of that, going into great detail on all this as an ancient text. And at this point, I kind of have a big problem, because on the one hand, you've all heard me say that A, I believe the Bible is true. B, I believe the Bible is written in 5th grade reading level English. It only takes a theologian or some other know-it-all with expensive pieces of paper hanging on their I love me walls to make it say something other than what a child could discern from the plain text. And C, I am on a quest for truth, and I don't care where that leads me. I just want to know. Yet, in spite of all that, and in those 3 bullet points, I believe the earth is round. I believe the earth is round. Why do I believe the earth is round? This is one of those things that was like a no-brainer a couple of days ago. Now all of a sudden I'm going, okay, I got to prove that the earth is round. And there are lots of arguments that would be useful in proving that the earth is round, no doubt about it. But it's like, okay, the Bible and Enoch are saying otherwise, so at this point I'm really kind of left with more questions than answers and wondering if I'm just a big hypocrite. So, hence the reason for this broadcast and my guest tonight. Yeah. Guys, this is a subject I did not even want to look at. But I couldn't avoid it. My Facebook page was like blowing up for the last week with Mark Sargent, Eric Dubay, and what's the guy's Math Boylan videos. Yeah, that's the guy. These are guys I never even heard of last week. Then my friends Basil and Gons, some of you guys know them, did a show on Canary Cry Radio recently with Mark. I decided to listen to it. I had to do my taxes this past Monday down in Corsicana, which is about an hour and a half drive, and the show was almost about that long. So it was a perfect show to listen to on my long drive. And I went into it kind of rolling my eyes like, what the heck? You know, what is this all about? And I came out of it scratching my head. Honestly, I didn't want to go any deeper, but I have to say, it's all I've been looking at this entire week. All week long, I've been watching videos like crazy. I watched Dark City last night. It's a DVD that I've had for a long time. Watched that. I watched The Maze Runner, a bunch of movies that seem to be indicating all this stuff as if, you know, the people writing these scripts are trying to put something out there for us to consider. And I mean, it just wouldn't let me go. So, and of course, my Facebook page blowing up with people debating and arguing and everything like usual. So I decided to reach out to some of these guys, and Mark was the first person I invited and the first one to respond. So here we go. Mark, are you there, sir?
But are you sure it's a globe?
Yeah. You know what's crazy about that? I had this picture that in my it was wallpaper in one of the walls of my bedroom. It took up the entire wall.
Yeah.
And it's the famous picture everybody's seen of the full globe.
Yep.
With Africa in the front, that kind of crescent-shaped cloud that you referred to in your videos.
Yep.
The problem with that wallpaper, though, is on the foreground, it shows the surface of the moon. Well, so the implication is this picture is taken from the moon, And I looked at that picture every day for like my entire childhood. But then if you go research that picture, allegedly, it was taken, like 15 hours or so after they left Earth's orbit or whatever, by the astronauts allegedly en route to the moon. So that picture's a lie.
Yeah, that picture's a lie. I'm sorry, that poster is a lie.
Yeah, well, then you would think with all the missions that they supposedly went out there, supposedly going to the moon, which I completely question now that we ever went to the moon.
Yeah.
And, we've supposedly got all these probes going out into deep space. Some of them should have at least turned around and took some really cool shots of the Earth.
Oh, yeah.
But we have one that came out, a couple years ago, the Blue Marble.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just composite artwork.
Yeah. Everything is.
That's really disturbing, man, because I heard you say in one of your things, okay, try to describe why you believe in the globe without using the word NASA.
Yeah, try to do it. Can't do it. Can't be done.
Well, I mean, either NASA or the U.S. government or the military, none of which I trust.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Why would you? It is ridiculous that the fact that you can look up in Google or whatever search engine in 2015, look up the Earth from space and find one official NASA approved image of the Earth from space. That's it. And try finding full motion video. I dare you. That will take some time.
Okay. Now I gotta tell you, I don't know if it was you or Math that was, I think it was Math. I was
Matt,
watching of his, Matt. Is that,
or Math. Your choice.
Yeah, he spells it Math. He spells it.
Yeah, I know.
Whatever, Matt. Okay. So he's an artist. I'm an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a 3D animator, and I appreciate that you come from a video game background. I definitely want to talk about that a little bit.
Oh yeah, sure.
Because I'm in the process of creating a video game right now, as a matter of fact.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I have, in many videos that I'd done, I was part of an international missions organization as their multimedia director, and doing global missions. I used to do a lot of videos, of course, showing, the globe, showing the Earth, and I have created many 3D renderings of the Earth in space using the flat maps that you can get. It's all one big map of the whole Earth, and you can get separate cloud layers and all that and put it on there and map it on a 3D ball.
Oh yeah, make your own.
Your own. And one of the things he pointed out is this is a stop motion sort of
time lapse.
Time lapse, yeah, a time lapse deal, and it shows the Earth rotating, but the clouds are not morphing not even a minute tiny little bit. They're not morphing.
Yep. And he was the guy, the first guy to really, really point that out. And he would be the guy because his job as a contract, artist at NASA was to create organic cloud formations, on planets, and so he would know before anybody. He'd be like, okay, where's the weather, the moving weather? And it wasn't. And he called it out right away. It was brilliant.
Yeah, I've seen some of his videos where he was showing what looks like the surface of like Venus or something, and then he pulls out the camera out, and he's basically got a cutout hole in a black piece of paper held up to his t-shirt.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we are so easy to fool in that regards, Well, I mean, just look at your movies. Our movie special effects stuff has gone so far in the last 50, 60 years that if you didn't tell someone it was a movie, could you actually tell it was a movie? Right. I ask anybody, if you showed the movie Gravity, cut scenes from Gravity, the movie that came out last year with real, what they putting out as real NASA footage, try to tell the difference. It's extremely tough to do, which questions what is real and what isn't. And one of the clues, it's like the reason why there can be no official movies of the moon missions. Because you can't, it's too close. It cuts too close to home and blurs the lines.
Yeah, when I was listening to you talk about that on Canary Cry, I was like, what are you talking about? There's the right stuff and all these other, and of course, you eventually named those movies.
Yeah, the right stuff and, Apollo 13.
Yeah, I, as a kid, like so many others, you're same age as I am. I think you're about what, 46?
46?
Yeah, I'll be 46 in June. Yeah. So, I mean, we grew up with the space program, still on our parents glued to the TV.
Oh, yeah.
In our younger years. And, I wanted to be an astronaut. That was like,
oh yeah, lots of kids did.
Man, I wrote book reports on it. I drew pictures of it all the time. I was like obsessed with it. It's the reason I joined the Army. I joined the Army to fly helicopters because I had read that the astronauts had to learn helicopters to pilot the lunar lander.
Oh, neat.
And so I joined. I went through flight school. I became a helicopter pilot. My plan was to transition after a few years of that into the Air Force, fly jets, and eventually put my application into the space program.
Yeah.
And I did well, man. I passed all my tests with flying colors. I was in the top of most of the classes that I was in. Mm-hmm. And I had 4 applications put in and rejected for things outside of my control. It was always like budget cutbacks or, crazy things. Now I realize that I believe God was protecting me from a thoroughly Luciferian occult organization that lies through its teeth and kills people who don't agree with them.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
You would have been one of those people that had to sign the non-disclosure agreement and had to live with it and try to go to sleep every night.
Or been a Gus Grissom going up in a bar.
Well, yeah, or been a critic and ended up like Gus Grissom. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, okay, I'm going into this broadcast saying I still believe in the globe and around Earth because quite frankly, it's absolutely insane to say otherwise.
It is. It's ludicrous.
So why are we having this conversation?
You're asking me?
Well, okay, I mean, I don't want to go over too much of the same ground that you've done on so many other shows that I've already asked my audience to watch.
Okay.
But, kind of in a nutshell, what was it that, well, let me just put it this way. I think it's clue number 2. You were talking about the Admiral Beard, bird, how do I say beard? Bird.
Yeah, bird is the word.
Yeah, bird is the word, BYRD. Deal from 1926 to 59?
57 is when he died.
Okay, 57. You said that was sort of the turning point for you, so why don't we go down that path?
Yeah. When I was looking at this, again, the last thing I ever thought I'd be doing is, trying to take point on the flat earth, or I'm sorry, enclosed world, movement in 2015, because a year ago I would have laughed you out of the room. I absolutely would have. But when I was looking at, and I just kind of stumbled across it, I was looking at explorers that were doing Antarctic expeditions, and I stumbled across Byrd. Now, everybody knows, if you're a conspiracy guy, because, lots of people stumble across the hollow earth theory.
Yeah.
And he is really the guy when it comes to hollow earth theory, because, he flew his plane. He was the first one that went to the North Pole in 1926. And if you believe his, the hidden journals and the hidden stories, was that he found an entrance into a big cavern inside the North Pole that led into like a journey to the center of the earth type scenario where, it was a tropical environment and giants and a whole race, a whole new civilization.
All right, hold that thought. We're already going to break. We'll come
okay.
Pick it up from Hollow Earth. And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba, and tonight we're talking with Mark Sargent about, I can't even believe I'm about to say this, flat/enclosed Earth.
Yeah, let's go with enclosed Earth or enclosed world at this point, because I'm catching even flack from the flat Earth guys at this.
I know, that's funny, huh?
Yeah. Well, because in truth, and let's be clear here, I am not a true, pure, in the sense, flat earther. I do not believe it's as flat as a table, and I have some disagreements about, how the moon is represented and gravity and stuff like that. So I will officially say for the first time, this is an exclusive, that I am not a true flat earther, but,
all right.
But most people know the flat earth term.
Okay.
So I'm still going with it.
All right. Well, fair enough. I would say that I subscribe to, because of what you were talking about before the break, I had done quite a bit of research on Admiral Byrd's. I don't know why I get stuck on Beard, but Bird. Admiral Byrd's trip to the North Pole, because I had done a whole lot of research on Agartha, Inner Earth, and all of that.
Oh yeah, it's a great story.
I would say that I am a hollow Earth / expanding Earth, Neil Adams round globe guy. That's the position that I come from. But going back to your research, and I did a little bit of his work, looking into his work down in the Antarctic.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go there. What happened to you when you went down that path?
So after he left the North Pole, which again was strange in itself, because it's like, well, you'd think he'd go back there, especially if there was a civilization and all that. But in 1928, he was ordered to do his first expedition down at the South Pole, or known as Antarctica. And from 1928 to about 1954, he did a series of 4 expeditions, and they were very big. And this includes Operation High Jump. And I don't know if you want to backtrack and talk about High Jump later, you can. But after 1954, he would do these explorations and looking for something. We don't know what he was looking for, but he was looking for it for 30 years. And then during the breaks, he would go in and tour the States and do promos and because he was a national hero at the time, youngest admiral in the Navy, greatest living explorer, I think greatest probably American explorer ever. And in 1954, he does this interview on a CBS show, and you can still find it out there now. You can look for it, not just the edited version that I have on mine, in my clues, but you can find the unedited version. It's not that much longer, where he's talking about Antarctica, and he's really building it up, not just from a scientific standpoint, but he's building it up from a resource standpoint. He's saying this place is going to be a gold mine. He goes into it, there's a mountain range made entirely out of coal that can supply the entire world. There's oil, there's minerals, there's uranium, and he's really hyping it up. And everybody's down there. Russia's down there. England's, the allies from World War II, they're down there. Argentina, New Zealand, a whole bunch of countries. They're doing their thing, and it's setting up. Everybody's going to make a lot of money. They're going to be down there for the next 100 years. So we'd be down there now.
Yeah.
And then he goes back, and during that interview, he's talking about Operation Deep Freeze, which starts in 1955 and runs till 1956. He goes down there and does Operation Deep Freeze, and then everything gets real strange. Every country in the world acts differently after that. And I can't stress this enough, how weird it got after 1956. 1957, Russia and America just immediately start up their rocket program. Everybody leaves the ice in 1956. All the countries leave it. Russia and America start their rocket program in 1957. 1958, they start putting atomic weapons on the top of these rockets and start firing them straight up. And you can, look this up in Wiki, and I know we'll probably go over it a little bit later. We'll just look up high altitude nuclear testing. And they fire rockets up. 1958, they form NASA. 1959 is the weirdest year ever, because simultaneously NASA says that the Van Allen radiation belts are up above and they're super dangerous and nobody should ever go near them. And at the same time, they seal off Antarctica from everybody permanently. All the countries, a treaty is put in place in 1959. It's still in place today. It's not even negotiable until the year 2041. And it stops everybody from doing anything. No corporation, no matter how powerful, no oil, no mineral, no gas, nobody can go there and do anything from any country in the world. And this goes against, forget about capitalism. This goes against greed and everything that we are known for. And it's just, I'm looking at this going, how does this even happen? Are you kidding? The oil companies can do anything they want, and yet they cannot petition to go there. There's no animal life, there's no plant life, there's no indigenous population, there's no ruins to stomp, to knock over. There's supposedly nothing there that they can hurt, unless you count the penguins, and I don't. And yet, they seal everything off, and it just got weirder from there. It was, but yeah, that was my turning point. When I saw that, I was going, okay, there's something, what is so big that not only can you not come up with a cover story for it, but it's bigger than money. What is bigger than money? Sealing off Area 51, that was a cakewalk by comparison. You just, put up a whole bunch of signs and you buy real estate around it. But down there, you're sealing off an entire continent, millions of square miles. And you put a multinational navy in front of it, and, you put these big zones. The oil companies can't even come within 200 miles of the coastline. How does this happen? And, so that was, for me, that was my point of no return. That's when I knew that I had to keep exploring this, and, I was going to find some crazy stuff.
Yeah. He came back from Antarctica, and he makes a strange statement about wars that we fought in ships that can traverse the poles and everything.
Yeah.
Really fast and the whole deal. And Project Blue Book is opened up in 1952.
Okay.
And it was part of a series of systematic studies about UFOs conducted by the United States and the Air Force. And the first of two projects, Sign and Grudge, I think were the other two.
Okay.
And so he's talking, and all of a sudden when they start up the nuclear program, you get all these, like you said, they're shooting stuff straight up in the sky.
Mm-hmm. And one of the packages was called Operation Fishbowl, which I love.
Oh man. Well, you're right. Cause right before that, if you back up a little bit and with, was Operation High Jump.
Yep.
That, the belief was the Nazis took off for Antarctica, and so they're going to go down there and find him, and so they sent all these battleships and all this military equipment down there to go find stuff.
Yep.
Then he comes back with this report, and then in 1952 you got Project Blue Book starts up, and also from July 12th through I think it was about the July 29th, 1952, there's a rash of UFO sightings over the skies of our nation's capital. It's a lot of weird stuff started going on there.
Oh yeah.
Then this book, have you ever heard of the Urantia book?
I have not.
It's like a 2,000 page thick book, called the Urantia book. It shows up in Chicago somewhere between 1924 and 1955. Interestingly enough, at the same time, Byrd is doing all the stuff that he's doing. Well, the authorship of this book, to this day, remains unverified. No, it's published by the Urantia Foundation, but the authors of the book, in the book, claim to be basically angels. So what do you do with that? I mean, whoever it was.
Yeah.
I would say it's one of the most dangerous books on the planet. It's a very in-depth book. It claims to try to fill in the gaps and correct mistakes in the Bible. So right off the bat, my radar's going off on that.
Sure.
So you got all that going on, but when you have Werner von Braun going down to Antarctica as a space program is created as a result of Project Paperclip, all these Nazis create this our space program, and von Braun's down there picking up rocks from Antarctica.
Oh yeah. I've heard about this.
And you're like, well, was he picking those up to show people later that would be what the astronauts present as moon rock?
Well, sure. Yeah, they had to come from somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and if we didn't go to the moon, where did they come from?
There you go.
So you got all that, and then you got Van Allen saying, "Hey,"
who was a NASA employee? Yeah,
right, saying, "Wow, there's this really intense radiation dome or band or whatever you want to say surrounding the Earth." And so my first thought was, okay, if there's really this intense radiation band up there, why are you blowing off more radiation?
Yeah. And I had heard the story, the rumor that, and I'm going to have to find it again. I remember reading it years ago that some of those tests they were trying to punch a hole through the Van Allen belt, which is a bunch of crap.
Yeah.
Because they started testing in 58 and the belt wasn't even discovered until 59. So your initial, motivation wasn't the belt. But anyway, go on. Sorry.
Well, if you've got already this intense band of radiation, you're blowing off nuclear bombs, presumably this side of that band of radiation. All you're doing is creating another band of radiation going around.
Yeah.
So you're intensifying the radiation. And what really caught my attention is, my first book was Babylon Rising and the First Shall Be Last. I did an update on it. And in the update, I wrote about 50 pages. I added about 50 pages to the book, most of it dealing with NASA and the occult roots of it and everything like that. And when you realize that the new program that they're working on right now is called Project Orion.
Ooh.
If you go on YouTube and just look up Project Orion plus radiation, you'll see NASA videos where engineers are talking about how they're spending tons of time and money and effort to figure out the radiation problem, to make sure that astronauts are protected.
I've seen that with that young guy. He's got to be like 30, is doing a lot of the narration.
Well, there's like 3 or 4 different videos of different people.
Yeah. It's like, we're going to deal with this radiation problem. And then you're like going, wait a minute, what happened to the radiation problem 50 years ago when you went to the moon 6 times?
In a tin can with jumpsuits.
Yeah. That Van Allen belt was absolutely, it seemed like a good idea at the time for NASA, but it absolutely backfired. Because they didn't know. They had 10 years to figure out the radiation problem. And the only way to solve it, even today, is lead shielding. And they said, well, we can't put that much lead on top of the rock. It's never going to work.
Yeah.
And so they just sent them anyway with no shielding. and, think, well, no one's going to really notice. And then the internet came out and, well, that ruined everything.
Well, yeah. I mean, you look and supposedly it was no big deal. I mean, I've seen videos where people have asked the astronauts, what about did you experience anything weird or anything going through the radiation belts? And the astronauts act like they don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you're like, really? And now all of this effort is being put into shielding the Orion capsule and everything from all the intense radiation that was no problem, 50 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, and to your point, I mean, yeah, not only because this is a round trip to the moon and back. You don't go once through the Van Allen belt. You go twice. Not only did nobody die from radiation poisoning, nobody got radiation sickness.
Or cancer.
No long-term effects, and the capsules should have been completely contaminated by that point. And yet, they're sitting down in the Air and Space Museum, there isn't a trace of anything on them. Absolutely.
So,
ridiculous.
When, I was already tracking down all of that research when I was doing my book, but when I heard you talking about from a video game perspective, and this is where I want you to talk about, okay, if you're creating an enclosed world in a video game, what would you do so that the inhabitants of your fake world wouldn't realize that it's an enclosed?
Well, yeah, that's the interesting part, because when I initially started building it, I was going, okay, how if I run into something that doesn't jive, I'm not gonna keep going. Like with weather systems or with underwater conveyor systems or magma systems, and everything was working out. And then I was going, okay, let's hypothetically, let's say we are in a giant Truman Show environment, thousands of miles wide and at least hundreds of miles high. How would you hide this? And from a game standpoint, we're doing this now in games. Look at Warcraft for a perfect example. I won't get into it too much, but I'll give you from the enclosed world standpoint what you would do. First thing you would do is you would decrease temperature going to the outer edge, and you decrease it fairly quickly, and then it would take a big nosedive to the point where salt water would freeze, which is about 15 degrees, and icebergs start forming. And then if you still made it past that, you've got, the coastline of Antarctica, which is completely barren, and it slopes up 2 miles almost straight up and then plateaus out to where now not only do you have, sub-freezing temperatures, but you're talking about altitude sickness. And then you've got no plant life or animal life for several hundred miles at least, unless you're using Matt Boylan's scenario where it just keeps going on and on until you get to the next world, to where it's almost impossible, even with modern technology, to get anywhere, to get that far. And then as far as you're talking about a gaming simulation, forget about the outer edge. The upper edge is even more interesting, because what you do is you reduce oxygen levels and temperature simultaneously. So oxygen levels drop off to where even at 18,000 feet, most people can't even survive. So, balloons are going to have a really tough time. And without pressurized cabins or, oxygen supplies, planes are going to have a tough time. And then temperatures really, really drop, depending on what level of atmosphere you're at. Between those two natural systems, that takes care of 99% of the people, because it gives people the illusion of choice, especially if you're out in the boats on the outer edge. Because you remember the old explorers, you'd be out in a boat and the temperature get worse and worse, get colder and colder, and the winds and the storms, and then you'd see icebergs and it's like, we're turning back. So the illusion of choice would be yours. So those are the two biggest broad strokes in designing something like this. And they work very, very efficiently.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, I watched the movie Dark City.
Yeah.
Last night, which is
great movie.
I won't go there, but that movie freaked me out so bad. When it first came out back in the 90s, the floating derby hat guys just really kind of freaked me out. But I watched it again last night with this whole flat Earth thing in mind, and of course you see the way the movie ends and everything. You're like, okay, and Shell Beach.
Yeah, Shell Beach.
the whole deal. And I picked up on that right away when I saw your clue there, Shell Beach.
Yeah, that was my little inside joke.
Yeah, for the nerds like me that out there. Okay, so if you think of it that way, I'm going to go ahead and entertain the idea that we're in an enclosed world. Mm-hmm. Well, that in the Hollow Earth doesn't really affect that. Nope. Either. I mean, you could still for a Hollow Earth.
Absolutely, you can have a Hollow Earth in my model. Absolutely, you can.
Yeah, and so if that's what you're going to do, and everybody, you say flat Earth, and everybody imagines ships going off a cliff, in a waterfall. and all the oceans draining, which is nonsense. If as the Bible says in Isaiah that it's a circle,
Yep.
but you've got a 2-mile high wall of ice surrounding the entire outer edge of the circle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it keeps everything in just fine.
Oh yeah.
And then if you have some sort of canopy dome or whatever in the and again, go to the creation account, separates the waters from the waters and puts a rakia, a firmament in the midst, to separate that. Well, okay, so then, from a gaming perspective, you make it very difficult with the salt water, with the cold. There's no way to go. First of all, it's a vast distance, so you have to have enough food and drinkable water.
Drinkable water, yeah. 3% salt solution. That's brilliant design.
Yeah.
Right there. It's simple. People don't realize 3% means, you can still have marine life, but humans can't drink it. It's
right.
Yeah.
Well, I believe we have a brilliant creator, so
there you go.
Let's go with that. And then you have all the obstacles, and then you have a 2-mile high wall, which prior to aviation is pretty ridiculous to think that any explorer would be able to do anything with that prior to aviation.
Yep.
But then even with aviation, okay, let's say we get up there, we get stuff up there, you still need to have enough supplies to do something there because there's no vegetation and there's no animals there.
Yep. Yeah.
Other than the penguins and the outer islands areas, probably.
Yeah.
So that's great from the edges, but then when we come into the space age, you have something that closes off the top, or you tell everybody there's a really scary radiation belt out there, so it kind of,
awfully convenient, isn't it? Yeah, between those two things. So NASA gets formed in 1958, which effectively militarizes space for the world. If you want to do anything above commercial air travel, you have to go through NASA. And then in 1959, NASA, of all people, announced that, oh yeah, by the way, there's this really, really scary thing up there, so you probably shouldn't do any private space programs. And by the way, I think it was just either this week or last week, where SpaceX supposedly is now delivering stuff to the space station, which means now, SpaceX is now in on it. So. Okay,
so yeah, all right. Let's go there. It's the International Space Station, because that's something everybody wants to say. Well, we've seen it. Supposedly, they make an announcement on TV. Hey, the International Space Station is going to be flying over Dallas, Fort Worth. So if you have to be out at 3:00 in the morning, look up. Yep. Which would be so easy to fake because, even with telescopes and stuff, you're not going to see much. You might see, a blob going across.
Yep.
They just have to put something up high enough up there and then tell everybody what it is, and our brain fills in the rest. But what's your take on that?
Well, yeah. The ISS, and for people who haven't had the pleasure of watching this, just look up on, either Google or, YouTube, and look up ISS hoax. And you'll see that the question I have is, if the ISS is really up there, then why are you faking all the interior shots? Because the interior shots are embarrassingly bad, and I hope that NASA is listening to this.
It's so bad. It's like
they're awful.
Dude, George Clooney, and Sandra Bullock.
Yeah, in Gravity.
In Gravity, as brilliantly. I saw it on IMAX. That was
yes, beautiful.
Like, wow, why are you putting out such crap?
Yeah.
When you have GoPros.
Yeah, and for the people that, I'll give them the Reader's Digest version of this, which is, there are 3 things you gotta look for in the ISS. I'll give you the bullet points of the videos that are out there. There's a bunch of videos, but the 3 bullet points are, 1, why is no ISS shot interior wider than a commercial airliner? And by that I mean, it's the same width as the airliners they use to train the astronauts in zero-G, scenarios. 2, why are there no hatches between compartments? And I know why from a production standpoint, because it'll slow people down if you open and shut things. But in a real world situation, it's like a submarine. You can't have everything wide open, because if you get any sort of hole, any sort of puncture, that space station is gone, and they're all wearing khakis and polo shirts in there. They're done. And third, of course, is, the one that everyone has caught, and that is, the permed hair. It was horrible. They permed the women's hair so that if there was any sort of shift in gravity, and there shouldn't be on the ISS if it's real, but it would be on a flight simulator because you can't determine turbulence. We can't see it even with our current technology. A woman's head her hair would trail behind her. Yeah. So their answer was, instead of putting a hat, instead of cutting their hair, instead of pulling their hair back, to put enough hairspray in it that it was probably, if there was a match anywhere, her hair would just burst into flames. It was just horribly embarrassing. I honestly, that was the worst option they could have chosen. And it was embarrassing enough that the brunette woman who was accused of being Medusa, she cut her hair, I think, 6-7 weeks ago. And so now she's got really, really short hair. It's like, well, about time.
Yeah, well, if you look at people actually doing maneuvers or whatnot in the Vomit Comet, the Zero-G plane, you're right. I mean, they show there's plenty of footage of women who have long hair, and it's almost like they're underwater.
Exactly, exactly like they're underwater.
Yeah, the hair trails and everything. But I did see that video you're talking about, the ISS, and it shows them supposedly in the ISS, and it looks like they just got hit by a meteor or something.
Yeah.
Everything jumps to the side. You're like, what?
Yeah, it's this sudden jolt and they have to cover for it. And it's like, really? This is what it's come to? You know, that's the best take? You know, you think that, you know, they have to do this multiple times. And, the director absolutely should not be doing anything. He should be, doing straight to video work in Hollywood at this point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's not even good enough to do that. I mean, he get a job in Hollywood. Okay, so personally, I think the Apollo missions are a load of crap.
Absolutely.
I don't buy them for a minute.
Nope.
And I question the other ones now too, because and it's a big if for me, if we are in an enclosed system, then it's hard to believe that they ever did anything up there with the docking maneuvers and everything they supposedly did with the Gemini program.
Oh yeah.
And Mercury supposedly. First of all, the fact that all of their missions are named after the Nephilim in the fallen ones.
Yep.
That's a big thing, and they're all Freemasons. Or most of them are. And so, I mean, right there, every red flag I have is going off. So.
Oh, yeah. The Apollo missions, and I won't dig too much into the Apollo missions because, they've been blown so full of holes at this point that it'd be redundant. But it did answer a question for me, because when I was looking at the initial Apollo stuff and some of the Skylab and stuff like that, I kept bugging me. I was like, why? What would be the motivation? And then as I was going into the enclosed world system, it hit me, and I was like, because I was asking the wrong question. And in fact, it wasn't even a question. It wasn't that they wanted to fake it. They had to fake it.
Right.
Because they couldn't do it. And so everything had to be faked. And unfortunately, it's spiderwebbed, because once you start doing that, anything that technology, because it advances and, we get better and better stuff, you have to keep faking it. And it just gets worse and worse. And the old story, why we haven't gone back to the moon since 72, there's only so long they can keep that thing going. Yeah. To the point now where they're not even talking about the moon. They're saying, oh no, we're going to go to Mars in like 2024, which is never going to happen. You can't fake that either, because the internet hive mind has gotten so much better at spotting stuff. The internet has basically changed the game, to where if you even think about trying to do something on Mars, it would be shot down. You'd never be able to release the footage. Never be able to do it.
What's that? Capricorn
1.
Capricorn 1.
Capricorn 1, 1979 movie, which actually, again, people who haven't seen Capricorn 1, 1979, go out and find it in the bargain bin somewhere. It's brilliant. Yeah. Highest grossing film of 1979, which basically, and you couldn't even make this movie today, which basically showed you how you could fake a mission to Mars. Yeah. And it was done, done all under the pretense of NASA. It's like, basically they said Mars is too dangerous. We don't have the technology, so we're going to fake it.
Yeah.
And they showed basically how they did everything.
But and exposing the moon mission at the
exposing the moon mission, and it was done. And notice that wasn't I said independent film, because none of the major studios picked it up, and it was just this independent CBS studio executive who happened to be part of the team, part of the crew for his local region that rebroadcast the moon stuff in 1972. And he was so disgusted with the production value, not that he believed that Apollo was faked, but he thought the broadcast was so horrible that he said, I'll just do my own.
Nice. Well, we'll talk about that when we come back from the break. And we're back for the second hour of the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba, and tonight we're talking with Mark Sargent about the enclosed Earth model. Okay, so before the break, we're talking about
Capricorn 1.
Yeah, Capricorn 1, we were talking about earlier. Okay, for whatever reason, they locked off Antarctica. Nobody can go there. Every new nation that comes along that has any, real means to do anything, has to sign this thing saying you can't go there.
Yep.
So Antarctica's locked off. That's a big what?
Yeah, big.
Then you have NASA, and there's absolutely no way we can trust anything to do with this Luciferian occult, Nazi Freemason organization. The ISS is just as big a fraud as the Apollo program.
Yep.
What about satellites?
At this point, I can't trust anything above spy planes. How can I? If Apollo is almost cartoonish now, and the ISS is just, putting out horrible footage, then how can anything be trusted above spy planes? I mean, yeah, there's stuff flying up there, no question. Do I know exactly what they are and what technology they're using? No, I don't.
There are people in the communications sector who would swear up and down based on their jobs and the things that they do that, there are satellites up there, we're in communication with them all the time with our various, be it cable, or not cable TV, but, satellite TV or what have you that's based on, allegedly based on, satellite technology.
Sure.
I mean,
to that I would answer though, I would take it the other direction and say, look, there are thousands and thousands of NASA employees, engineers, people that, physicists, people that did the control rooms, people that did nothing but wiring, people that just did nothing but construction. And none of those people were in on the loop. They would all say the same thing. Oh no, we built rockets. Those rockets went nowhere.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yeah, you can have, telecommunications people. It's like, yeah, we satellites. It's like, really? You mean, so like this, the Apollo rockets, where did those go? The space shuttles, where did those go? These things are taking high arcs and splashing down somewhere or landing somewhere else that, that contrary to what we're being told.
That's, okay. Before, I'm a neophyte in all this, so, this is all brand new to me, and I'm like a kid in a candy store going, whoa, what is, I remember, cause, like I said, I wanted to be an astronaut, so I mean, anytime there was something going up, I was watching it. Yeah. On the news or whatever. And I always wondered, okay, if they're just going straight up, why do they seem to always do this arcing thing? And, like the space shuttle especially would do this roll and then go basically horizontal.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay. And then I saw some of the footage of rockets going straight up and then looking like they hit something.
Yeah. In fact, quite a few of the atomic tests that were done at altitude, if you look at, in the wiki listings, there were failures in 1960 and 61. A bunch of failures. And I think they were probing because they shot stuff up there for 4 years straight. And I think they were really, the first ones were megaton hits, but then they lightened the loads and looked like they were really just probing the perimeter. And I think they were doing it for the space program to see the boundaries, basically where they needed to roll over so that they wouldn't crash rockets anymore. Because again, not a coincidence, the same time they stopped atomic testing, at the end of 1962 was the same time they started, firing up the Apollo missions. They started researching and started, work on, the real stuff. So very, very interesting. And of course, the same time, that Stanley Kubrick started working on 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is a whole nother story.
Yeah. And I recommend people look into that. The Kubrick connection to the moon landings. It's a mind bender right there.
Yep.
But okay, so if we're in an enclosure and we blew up all those nuclear bombs, not just in the atmosphere, but 2,053 nuclear bombs were blown up in 53 years on this planet before they called a ceasefire. This was part of my Archon Invasion Part 2 DVD research I did on that, and that means it's all stuck in this enclosure then, and no wonder we all have cancer.
Well, yeah. And I know that there's a lot of debate on whether the footage, is real, and there's quite a few people that have talked about, the validity of atomic weapons. But at the same time, for me, it's like, look, I'm not gonna go down that road right now just because the footage to me doesn't look that bad. The stuff that was done in the early 40s, especially the ship tests, where those big columns of water, it's like, despite what you may think about, uranium and plutonium and what fission is possible and is not possible, there's some serious explosives being used.
Oh, no.
But to your point, yes, absolutely, there'd be a lot of stuff still in the atmosphere. No question.
Well, it would have no place to go if we're in an.
Oh yeah. Well,
we're under the dome.
Yeah, depending on how the ventilation system works, and the jet stream works.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so but here's the other thing. People say, well, I've seen satellites go by. It's like, really? A satellite's the size of a bus. So, when you see an airplane at 35,000 feet, it's a speck as, to the naked eye.
Yeah.
And an airplane's a lot bigger than a bus. So
yeah.
Do you really think you see something that's way higher than that?
I think I've mentioned it a couple other things, but I've gone out because somebody mentioned to me, it's like, you want to see some interesting stuff. You want to question satellites, go out with some night vision binoculars in a clear sky and, spend a couple hours. You don't have to spend that long, just looking up at a clear sky. And I've spent the last 3-4 years in Colorado looking up, and I thought they were satellites too. And that was my first comment. It's like, man, there's a lot of satellites up there. I mean, in excess, the sky is just crawling with them. And then they started making erratic movements and flying in squadrons. I'm like, okay, what exactly is up there?
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm going, is there anything like, are there real satellites, or are they just all, or did the government just say, oh yeah, by the way, that those things that are flying up there are satellites?
Well, that's okay, let's put the tinfoil hat on and play.
Yep, here we go.
Here, while we're at it.
Sure.
Cause there's Plenty, L.A. Marzuli's got a whole series out called The Watchers, DVD series. Mm-hmm. And, he's exploring the UFOs and stuff like that. And there's been an increased activity of flying orbs being seen all over the world,
Oh yeah.
Doing really crazy. I saw one, when was it? It was, about a year ago. And I took pictures of it and everything. I mean, this thing was crazy in broad daylight too.
Wow.
And it was like a big silver ball, mm-hmm. just sitting there. I'm like, what is that? And then all of a sudden it started doing really weird stuff. And I watched the thing for at least a good 5, maybe even 10 minutes. I watched this thing do weird stuff. Yeah. So, whatever that is, I believe, Chariots of the Gods, as Von Daniken might say, are really, the cherubim, chariots, as my friend Josh Peck would say. The angels have vehicles that they move about in. So.
There's nothing that says that they wouldn't.
Right.
It's like everyone initially says, well, it's wings and they're self-propelled, and it's like, why not? Why wouldn't they have their own machines?
Well, yeah. I mean, if we accept that there's a tabernacle up there, there's a throne up there.
Oh yeah. If there's buildings, there's structures. Heck, look at Ezekiel.
Right.
The wheels.
There's one described right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Well, so if that's the case, I'm just looking for counter arguments.
Okay.
Basically, I'm when I play chess, I have my objective of what I'm trying to do. But when I'm playing somebody, I'm watching what they're doing, and I'm trying to figure out, what does my opponent see? What is he doing? What holes are there in my defenses that he's thinking he's going to get through? Mm-hmm. So I like to kind of, in my mind, get on the other person's side and I want to see what you're seeing, essentially. and thinking, okay, are there other ways to describe what we're seeing, like the circle?
Sure.
In Isaiah. Well, it's a globe. Well, no, it's a circle. There's another word for ball.
Yeah, it's not like sphere was an unknown concept.
Right. So could there be another way to look at it? Could those lights in the sky not be satellites and actually be, let's say, angel activity? And the Bible talks about an increase of especially fallen activity in the last days. So I can go with that. I can see that. But what about the telecommunications that say, well, like RF frequencies and radio waves and stuff like that, they only can go so far line of sight, and the only way we're able to have radio communications and stuff the way we do is because of satellite technology and things like that.
I've had several people send that to me, and I haven't done that much research into it, but I noticed that the stuff that people have been sending me have talked about how it could be compensated with huge amounts of fiber optics, a lot of triangulation with towers. And, if we are talking about a solid structure, bouncing stuff off of the roof itself, off the ceiling.
Yeah.
Not to get into much into the HARP technology, but the whole concept of HARP was that you're bouncing it off a layer of atmosphere.
Right.
Think about, and that's considering a layer of atmosphere. What if it was actually a solid structure? Think of how much more effective HARP could be. How much more accurate it could be if you could actually bounce something off, like firing a tennis ball at the ceiling. You could pinpoint that to you wouldn't even have to deal with atmospheric conditions.
Yeah, I mean, ham radio people will tell you they're bouncing off the ionosphere or whatever.
There you go. Yeah, or is it that they're bouncing off the ionosphere, or are they bouncing through the ionosphere into something harder, and it's coming back down? Maybe it's that everyone's been mistaken for all, the limited amount, that we've had radio technology, that they've been doing something, that the real answer was something more permanent.
Well, okay. What about like the Aurora Borealis? What would your take be then in a canopy / enclosure?
No different than the Aurora Borealis and the Northern Lights, and they are very pretty. I actually got to watch them when I was when I was near Vancouver, Canada. It's no different than a blood moon or lunar eclipse, and it is simulated. You have to, because like lunar eclipse in an enclosed system, there is no Earth between the sun and the moon, so you basically simulate it. And I think some of the footage that's out there on YouTube, is pretty conclusive when it comes to that. So, and when it comes to Aurora Borealis, I mean, it's pretty, but it's not, in my opinion, as masterful a design as the stars and planets. I think that's way more gorgeous a piece of artwork than the Aurora Borealis. The Aurora Borealis to me is just equivalent to a special effect.
So, okay, so you're talking about a simulation. You talk about a holographic universe.
Yeah, a very, very. I mean, the only thing we can equate it to, because our technology is somewhat limited, is a really high-end planetarium. And those are pretty convincing. I know people don't go to planetariums anymore.
I did when I was a kid.
Oh, there you go. I mean, those were stunning. And yeah, you would have gone, in the late 70s, early 80s, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, those are really, really neat. Imagine doing that, what you could do with a very, very high-end amount of technology for something like that. And people were saying, well, what about the Coriolis effect, where the stars rotate differently in the southern hemisphere? I'm going, using instancing, what we have now, programming instancing, with multiple planetarium type scenarios, you can do just about anything you want. Not to use the game stuff too much, but look at Warcraft and go from one zone to another zone. I know people don't look at the sky, but look at how the sky changes and how it blends, how it perfectly can transition from one area to the other, from one section of stars to another section of stars. And again, this is technology we have at our disposal. At our disposal now in a very limited sense.
Well, I mean, if we accept that we have a creator, and I would actually argue that the enclosed model is a stronger argument, if it's true, certainly for a creator, than that we're just a tiny speck in an arm of a galaxy in a gazillion galaxy huge universe, speck of nothing.
Yeah, which is why I made number 10, which I think you watched, called Hiding God. And absolutely it is. And it is one of the reasons why it's hidden and has been hidden so well over the last 50, 60 years. And that is because if you're talking about a structure, if you're talking about the firmament, then you're talking about the handprint of God. Yeah. And every, there are so many people that would really, really, I think benefit from seeing something like that, or even realizing or getting some confirmation from somebody rather than just, to hide the evidence entirely.
Well, you had a really interesting take on the reason the astronauts refused to put their hands on the Bible.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
That was Souls in the System, number 11, the last clue that I did, which was, I think, 4 weeks ago now. And I just kind of stumbled across it, and that was one of those other things that bugged me, because, the astronauts, it was from a 2004 video called Astronauts Gone Wild by a guy who I still don't like very much. I can't remember his name, Strapold or whatever his name was. A very irritating interviewer. And he went up to the astronauts and he was trying to trip them up. He was basically trying to pretend that it was a legitimate interview, and he was going to try to trip them up on the details. And he came up with this little hook of he was going to make them swear on the Bible, to say that they went to the moon. And you're thinking, okay, that's funny, and all that, but the astronauts wouldn't do it. None of them would do it. And it kept bugging me. I was going, what, are they just strong? I mean, I've met, my family, strong Christian family. So why wouldn't, but I've seen Christians lie under oath. It happens every day. It's called perjury. It happens all the time. Plus, they're not under oath. They're not in a courtroom. So why weren't they lying? And then it kind of hit me. It's like, oh, I get it now. Because it's one thing to lie under oath if you're not sure there's a God. if you're not sure there's a creator. But if you know you're an enclosed system and you have proof, whether you've gotten the file or you've seen it yourself or whatever, you're part of the deception, then you know for sure, and then it becomes much more real. It becomes, the Santa reference, and that is the naughty and nice list doesn't mean anything until you see Santa in your living room. And then it means something. So these guys weren't going to roll the dice. It's like, yeah, they knew they probably wouldn't get into trouble, but they weren't absolutely sure, so they wouldn't do it. And it was a fascinating, little take. And so that's where I kind of rolled with it and said, look, this is what would happen to the entire world if they found out there was a creator. And that was, whether or not, we're not talking about an evil, horrible overlord type creator. We're talking just, look, a creator.
Somebody's watching.
If somebody's watching, are you going to do the things you would normally do? And what I'm talking about is, would you lie to hurt somebody? Would you steal? Would you murder? Would anybody ever murder anybody? Deliberately? Would you do anything? Would you kidnap somebody? None of these things, wars would end, hate crimes would end, all this stuff would end because you would know, that there was a creator. And, for me, that's where I kind of, it's like, look, this is the only conspiracy you can say this about. Everything else is, kind of a downer. This thing could actually change the world in a positive way. And, that's why I just, I got tingles and I was like, wow, this thing could really, really be something special.
Yeah, I mean, that brings up motivation. It's like, okay, why? Well, first of all, I mean, if you don't believe in God, it's just a book. Why? Who cares? Why would I care about putting my hand on the Bible? Mm-hmm. You're not under a court. You're not going to be judged for anything. So,
nope.
The fact these guys got so belligerent and so angry for punching the guy.
Yeah.
They're like, no. I mean, why would you be that?
Yeah.
Scared to put your hand on the Bible. And when you said that, I was like, well, that kind of makes sense. But then it brings up, okay, the motivation why they would want to keep this reality a secret. And I think it really comes down to controlling the masses, the way they want to. And when it comes to like we were talking before the break, a tangled web we weave when we start a lie. I was watching an episode of Everybody Loves Raymond the other day. And it was a perfect illustration because he was supposed to spend time with his mother, and he wanted to go to the movies instead. So he told a lie to get out of it. And he basically went to the movie with his wife Deborah. But then through the course of the episode, more and more things had to be added to that lie, cover all the various angles and loose ends that were there, and the lie gets so huge by the end of the episode,
Yeah, and that's what's happened with the authority, the powers that have covered this thing up, because this thing was never going to be a secret forever, and they knew this. It is, they've had to plug the holes in so many different areas over the last 60 years that especially with the space program, Antarctica, not that much because it's out of sight, out of mind. Most people don't even know that there's nobody down in Antarctica.
Right.
But the space program definitely, and there's other little things like the Southern Hemisphere plane flights. There's little things, little cracks in the system, but I think at one point they would have had to, because these are some very, very smart guys, at least some of them, not the people that are directing ISS, but the really smart guys have to have a contingency plan. And so, they've got to put this into effect because yes, they do not want the world to become more spiritual. They absolutely don't want to do it. They could probably recover from it eventually, even though NASA would fold and quite a few science organizations would fold. They don't want that to happen. It would be a real wrench in the works. And they're going to do whatever they can to keep that. The decision was made back in 1956 and they've been sticking to it. And
and people are like, well, for that many, cause the people on the low end of the worker bees, everything's compartmentalized. So, I know that from being in the military,
Oh, yeah.
And I had various levels of secret clearances myself, but it's, you have only so much level of knowledge that is given to you based on whatever level that they want you to have.
Yeah.
And, some of the stuff that I did, look, I was a 23-year-old kid getting paid $265 a day plus per diem for a 4-hour workday to do whatever they told me to do.
Yeah.
So I'm like, whatever, So, these other people who got a nice career as engineers or computer engineers or whatever.
Oh, sure.
Building this stuff. And where's this money? You got Donald Rumsfeld announcing $2.3 trillion, I think it was, missing from the Pentagon's coffers on September 10th, 2001. a day before that exact office got allegedly hit by a plane.
Oh yeah.
All the evidence goes up and, oh, what do you know? Oh, well, everybody forgot about the $2 trillion. What could you do with $2 trillion?
A lot.
Maintaining a lie if you wanted to.
Yeah, you could build a lot of underground bases or help finance a space program, or you could do just about anything you wanted. There's almost no limit to what you could do with that sort of money.
All right, so let's address for the next half hour and 5 minutes, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the questions. I'll never get to all the questions. A lot of people are screaming at me right now going, asking a question. Shut up about that question. Oh, mad at me. I know it. But,
all right, throw them at me. What you got?
Well, to me, this one is so obvious. But everybody uses it. In fact, it was my knee-jerk reaction too. What about the ship going out to sea or coming up over the horizon? And it seems to me that that's an optical illusion, because when you get a telescope and you look at the same ship that you just saw go down the horizon and disappear from your eyes.
There's a couple different ways you could look at that. And the first one I'd like to refer people to is the railroad track example. And that is when you're looking at a railroad track or a picture of a railroad track, staring down the tracks, eventually it just narrows and narrows and narrows until it gets to a point and it disappears. Yeah. The ship argument, and you can find some interesting videos on this on YouTube, because it's inconclusive at the moment. But yeah, when a ship goes out to a certain point, you don't see it anymore. But if the curvature of the Earth is if there's a certain track to it, then even if you had a telescope, you still shouldn't be able to see the ship anymore.
Right.
Because it's gone beyond the line of sight. So a telescope shouldn't help you. But there are videos out there that are showing ships. It's like, okay, can't see the ship anymore, can't see the ship. But if you zoom in, the camera technology we've gotten has gotten a lot better in the last 5 years.
I've done it myself.
You zoom in with an HD camera and you can now see the ship again. And it's like, okay, depending on where that ship is and how far you think it is, you shouldn't be able to see it. So why do you see it? I don't really touch on it that much because my model has a slight curve in the center, right, but it's not nearly the globe curve. And there's so much argument about what the curve actually is. Is it 16 feet every 6 miles? Is it 9 feet every 6 miles? But it doesn't really matter. The point, most of what you were saying, optical illusion of some point, it doesn't do what we expect it to do.
Well, speaking of optical illusion, here's something else. Mm-hmm. And there's two things. Okay, I, as a missionary, I've been to over a dozen countries flying at 30,000 plus feet, mm-hmm, over the Earth, and you look out and your brain says, oh, look, the Earth's curved, because you've been looking at a globe your entire life and you look out and it looks curved. Mm-hmm. But if I really think about it, and I've shot footage of it, and I've looked at the footage that I've shot out the window because I've seen a lot of cool stuff, mm-hmm, it's not really curved. And
it's not curved.
There's a side-by-side video that I watched the other day.
The Red Bull versus the other one.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. Yep. And it's because of a fisheye
lens. Yep. Yeah, the fisheye lens on the Red Bull camera, which of course that one made national news. No accident there. Yeah. The saying which I love, I believe in coincidences. I've just never seen one. And that is, the Red Bull uses the fisheye lens, and the other weather balloon, which is, your generic, brown paper, weather balloon, goes up to the same altitude, and their picture they're taking is flat, but the Red Bull is not flat.
360 flat. This thing's going round and round and round, 360,
yep,
completely flat. But the telltale sign, first of all, the curve is outrageous at some points. You're like, man, the Earth is really small.
Oh, yeah. Fisheye lenses are completely exaggerated, yeah.
But when the guy jumps and he's got the camera attached, I guess, to his helmet or whatever, and he's somersaulted, doing flips through the air, the Earth's going from convex to concave, convex, concave.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what's the curvature? Which way is it curving now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that story had got a lot of press, but I'm glad that they did it because there's other people that are doing weather balloons. Apparently they're easier to come by nowadays. Yeah. And GoPros are so freaking cheap that the people are showing, yeah, it's absolutely flat. Now, granted, they're only going up, 120,000 feet or so, maybe 130,000 feet, which isn't that high.
But that's how high Red Bull went. They went to, 127, I think.
Well, regardless, it's not super high, yeah, but it's high enough that you should be able to see something. Absolutely.
Well, it's a lot higher than a commercial airline.
Oh, yeah. Commercial airliners cap out at, they used to be able to fly around 50,000 feet, but now they've got them in the 30s for some reason. There's some weird thing that happens at 50,000 feet, but.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyway, what other questions you got?
Oh boy, we got like a minute before the break.
Oh, well, okay, you got a quick one? maybe?
Well, just when we come back, the Bedford level experiment.
Oh yeah, well I can answer that in 2 seconds. That's actually that's like the train track argument, only it's on water. There was a canal out in England, I believe, and they were trying to do, and that's where they got the 16 feet every 6 miles, because the canal was straight for a long distance. And he said, when they did it, of course, this was before cameras and all that stuff, that when the boat went down the canal, and he had the thing at water level, the telescope device at water level, nothing changed.
Yeah.
So he said, there's no way I should have been able to see that boat at 6 miles. And he did.
Yeah.
So, again, it's not the most conclusive thing in the world, but it's still a great starting point.
Yeah.
And it's the basis for why we have people going out with HD cameras on the shorelines.
All right. Come back to the break and address some more stuff.
Okay.
We're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I am your host, Rob Skiba, and tonight we're talking with Mark Sargent about the enclosed Earth model. Okay, let's just get right into some of these questions. Now, as a kid, I was, like I said, I wanted to be an astronaut. I had first I had a 150 power telescope, then I had a 300 power telescope, and my eyes were glued to those things night and day. I had plates and filters that would let me look at the sun, and I studied the moon every night practically that I had the opportunity to do so. I've seen the moons around Jupiter. I've seen a lot with my own eye. I'm thoroughly convinced they're three-dimensional objects. What's your take on them?
I mean, they might be three-dimensional objects, but they're not millions of miles away. They may be very, very close. Do I think they're part of an illusion? Yeah, I do. The only three-dimensional objects I truly believe in that have some mass and solidity to them would be the sun and the moon.
Where do the craters on the moon come from?
That's an excellent question. I do not. I think they were part of the, either they were put there from a previous civilization, or, they were just part of the design of the moon itself. There's a wonderful, Crow 777, some of his YouTube stuff, he was one of the first to say, I listened to an interview that he did recently where he says, look, I've been watching the moon for years. I've never seen anything hit it ever. And granted, it hasn't been that long a time, but, if it was cratered, it was cratered long before us.
Okay. Somebody just messaged me and asked this.
Okay.
He mentions pilots today would not know about the conspiracy because GPS does all their navigation for them. The Navy is not that way. Every ship captain and thousands of lower ship officers would have to be in on the conspiracy as well. Putting a plane on cruise control and letting the computer take off and land while you sip a coffee in a cockpit is a whole lot different than sailing an ocean where supposedly Australia is on the other side of the disk as South America.
Yeah.
I graduated the Cleveland Junior Naval Academy for high school before I joined the Army, and ocean navigation is huge with naval forces.
Okay. But are these planes actually taking flights from South America to Australia? Is the military taking those long routes? No one's ever even suggested that.
There was somebody who is from South Africa. I have a pretty decent listening audience in South Africa, and I've been there myself. They say there is a nonstop flight from Johannesburg to Sydney.
Oh yeah,
it's just like 6,800 miles or something like that.
Yep.
Now, in the flat kind of disc model, it seems like it'd be a lot longer than that. How are they making it without stops?
Without stops, well, okay, there's two things you gotta look at. One, there probably is stops. There's a wonderful video, and, I can't remember who made it, but on YouTube, called Plane Routes Exposed. It's only been out, I think, a couple weeks. Basically what it shows is even those nonstop flights are stopping for refueling. They're making unscheduled stops for no apparent, it's not on the ticket, and they're not picking up passengers. They're just stopping for refueling. And apparently when you do that, you can get away with putting nonstop on the ticket, which is really, really strange. And the only reason we found out about this was social media, because there were people saying, oh yeah, there's supposed to be a nonstop, but, people were putting on their Facebook page and Twitter, that they were stopping at certain places. So look at that first. The other thing is the routes. And that is, fine. You have nonstops in the Southern Hemisphere? Fine. Show me the routes on real-time tracking. Show me how they got there. Because most of the real-time trackers absolutely wipe the planes off the map. And they will fix this eventually with software. They absolutely are going to fix this sooner or later, but right now they haven't. And that is once those planes, if they're below the equator, once they get offshore, 150, 200 miles, they disappear. They are pulled from the GPS system entirely. Not only are they pulled from the real-time tracker, but the plane logs themselves change from whatever location to approximate or estimated, and then you do not know where that plane is until it's about an hour away from landing. And then it just mysteriously appears back on the screen, and then the plane lands. And for most people, including the pilots, they don't care. It's like, look, we got here, we don't care. And the thought that, especially for pilots, and I don't care if it's a Navy pilot or commercial pilot, when it comes to the long routes, the last thing on their mind is that the map is wrong. No one's ever going to think that. They're going to think something else. They're going to think they got screwed up. Think they dozed off or vegged out or something. They're never going to, and even if they thought the map was wrong, who are they going to tell?
So this guy's saying you dodged the question. I'm talking about naval ships, not airplanes.
Oh, naval ships? Oh, you mean just how naval ships are getting on the long haul?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a reason why ships are kind of tricky, because some people said, you gotta track ships. And I did try to track some of the stuff that wasn't naval, but some of the commercial ships that were going out there. The problem with ships is, one, they're excruciatingly slow. Even naval ships are slow. I mean, the commercial ships, yeah, they're traveling, 16, 18 knots. I know some of the destroyers and some of the naval ships can travel a little faster. But the problem with ships is they do something that planes don't. And that is, they just stop or slow down for no apparent reason other than maybe there's a port issue or they're doing some maintenance, something that planes cannot do. And when that happens, it screws up the whole thing. The naval voyages are so long anyway and they also have to rely on GPS. So if his question is, would the whole entire Navy have to be on it? No, of course they wouldn't. Probably nobody on the ship would know where they were exactly on the map, because remember, the GPS system is telling them what the GPS wants them to see. It's not that the Navy guys are in on it by any stretch, but the GPS system, which is a Department of Defense system built by the United States military in 1995, was designed specifically to help cover this thing up, because it eliminates long distance travel routes. It fuzzes the math with the map so that it can show you what it wants to show you. Hopefully it sort of answers his question.
Well, I mean, when I look at the circle, what's the
azimuthal map.
Yeah, the azimuthal map.
Yeah.
I mean, it does look like it's a pretty huge, distance.
Oh yeah.
If you're going kind of in a outer disk straight.
Oh yeah, you can't take the outer disk. You've got to take shortcuts. But the GPS isn't going to show you those shortcuts. It's gonna take you closer to where it's not going to take you around the entire outer edge. It's going to take you more on the closer inner track if it can. Just because, the outer edge is stretched so much on that outer ring that, it'd be really, really tough to do, which is why planes don't do it. And ships, to a lesser degree, don't do it either. And I know he's probably saying, well, the Navy doesn't have to be in on it, because they're still running off the computer system. Yep. Only the GPS guys have to be in on it.
Well, even then, you don't have to, quote, be in on it. I mean, you're just being trained on equipment and trusting what it says.
Yeah, and some of those sea voyages are so long, they don't care. They don't know, some of those sea voyages last weeks, compared to ours.
But, I mean, the way we understand GPS is that information is coming down from satellites. So now we're back to the deal with the satellite.
That exactly, which is, in fact, somebody suggested that to me, which was, is the reason, and I didn't discuss this in the clue, which was, I said, they dropped off because they were being dropped off deliberately, but somebody else says, well, if the satellites aren't really there and they aren't really doing what we think they're doing, maybe they can't even cover the southern hemisphere when it comes to the ocean, because they don't have the coverage. They can't compensate with triangulation with towers or bouncing anything off the ceiling. Maybe they literally cannot track the planes.
I mean, there are people that on my Facebook that live in South Africa, and they say, no, we've been on the flights, the 11 or 12 hour flight that goes from Johannesburg to Sydney.
Sure.
With no stops. So,
okay. Which is also fine. Again, the fuel stops, that's only for some of them. But for those people that are doing the non-stops, tell me how they got there. Show me the telemetry.
Yeah, they sent me, I can't obviously send it to you right now, but they sent me from one of the flight websites or whatever, I forget what it was, Qantas or something like that.
Yep.
Sent me a screenshot of it. But I mean, I guess we could go round and round on that one.
Yeah, I know.
See, even with the round globe Earth, I remember as a kid flying from Texas to Massachusetts, and I think my grandparents had given me a ball, like a baseball or something.
Yep.
And I was a little kid. I was sitting in the plane, and I was kind of tossing the ball up in the air as I was sitting there. And my parents were like, knock it off and, stop it, you're distracting or whatever. And, but I was obsessed with trying to figure something out. And so I asked my dad, I says, Dad, how come I can if we're traveling really fast, how come I can throw the ball up and it doesn't go flying into the back wall? Why does it stay in my lap, when I throw it up and down? And he said, well, that's because the pressurized air in the plane is traveling with the plane. So, when you're throwing it up, you're in this controlled airspace, so to speak.
Yep.
Well, I mean, effectively, the entire planet would have to be in that same type of envelope of air that supposedly follows the planet at its speeding, in its rotation.
Yeah. Then
there should be massive differences in flight time and speed depending on which direction you're flying.
Yeah. It's an old argument. And again, I let others touch on it. I think Eric, may have touched on it. I don't think Matt did. But the argument is a pretty good one. And that is, look, if the Earth is traveling, spinning at 1,000 miles an hour and you're on the equator, it's a little less if you get up north, but at 1,000 miles an hour, if you're traveling from, with the spin, it's fine. You maybe, say you're going with gravity, like the ball in the plane you were just talking about. But if you're going against the spin, are you still, how is the flight being, exactly the same? Not taking into account the jet stream. It's an interesting little riddle. And of course, there's lots of textbooks that they'll say, well, it's because, gravity's locking it down and, they're going to throw out a whole lot of math and physics at you. But it's still a pretty good argument. And I still don't think it's as good an argument as the weight difference. Which was, look, if you're spinning at 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, it's sort of like a merry-go-round. Yeah, it's not going to throw you off, obviously, but it's still going to create some sort of, centrifugal force. So, but if you're staying at the North Pole, you're spinning at 0 miles an hour. No different than, if in the middle of a merry-go-round. You don't feel anything. You just get dizzy. So if you have a 100-pound weight at the North Pole, if you take that same weight and take it down to the equator, shouldn't it weigh a little bit less? A pound and a half, a couple ounces. Either way, it should be measurable and it should be consistent. But nobody does this test. And I think that's way more interesting to me anyway than the plane velocity test and easier to prove.
Okay. What about eclipses? How does that work? And I mean, is the sun and moon, and this is interesting too, because I quoted the book of Enoch earlier. If you read the sections of the book of Enoch that talk about the movements of the sun and moon, it tells you they're the same size. Several times actually it tells you the same size. Now we could say from the observer's perspective here on Earth, sure, okay. I mean, obviously the moon covers the sun completely, so, from the Earth, they must be the same size.
Yeah.
But, from the standard model we're all taught in school, the sun is, incredibly huge. The moon is smaller than the Earth. In the enclosed model, what does that look like, and how does eclipses work?
It's very interesting because, the sun is incredibly huge and 92 million miles away, and the moon is not very big, and it's 237,000 miles away. And yet, from a design point, coincidentally, the moon fits right over the sun as far as a solar eclipse goes perfectly. Which is, again, one of those weird coincidences, no different than why we only see exactly one side of the moon. That you'd think there'd be some sort of little rotation variance and we would see the other side of the moon eventually. Maybe not, in a month, but 6 months, definitely. You'd see some sort of rotation change, even if it was a degree every week.
That one's always tripped me up and I still don't understand it.
Yeah, there's nothing to understand. The moon is an utter fabrication. But in an enclosed system, the moon and the sun, at least for me, and I know, again, the flat earthers are going to argue because, some say, well, the moon is, a 2D projection. You could see through it. For me, the moon is a three-dimensional object that's being projected upon, or it has its own projection system inside it. So yes, it absolutely can travel in front of the sun and it can create a solar eclipse. But when it comes to the lunar eclipse, because the Earth isn't where you think it is, the lunar eclipse has to be fabricated from a projection standpoint. It has to be, the blood moon has to be created on the moon's surface itself. And again, I refer to, if people want to look out there, because he's got the best videos, and I'm waiting, you pure flat earthers, if anyone's got better video footage, I want to see it. The best guy that's got footage out there is not a flat earther. It's called Crow 777, CRROW 777. Look at his moon footage. That's all he does is take high def, really great videos of the moon, and he shows some really, really bizarre stuff. Yeah, you ought to take a look at it.
Yeah, I have not looked at it yet. I've heard you guys refer to it on the Canary Cry radio.
Oh yeah, it's amazing. So the lunar wave stuff is mind-boggling. I mean, to see that there's a resolution issue with the moon, you're looking at it from a technology standpoint, and you're going, what am I looking at exactly? Okay,
now going back to some of the biblical issues.
Yeah.
I have, in some of my presentations, when I talk about what I call the synchronized biblically endorsed extra biblical texts of Enoch, Joshua, and Jubilees. These are books not in our Bible, but referred to by name and quoted in our Bible.
Wait, what was that second one?
Joshua.
Yeah. I was about to say you didn't mention the last verse in chapter 3, but we'll get to that in a while. So go ahead.
Well, Enoch, Joshua, and Jubilees, they do sync up to what's in the canonized text in Genesis, but they fill in a lot of blanks and tell you stuff that the other books don't cover.
Yeah.
And the book of Joshua, we see this strange story where Joshua commanded the sun to stand still.
Yep. That's a great story.
It is a fantastic story, and the way it's written, it says, is it not written in the book of Joshua that Joshua commanded the sun to stand still? So really, the canonized text is referring to this other text, saying, well, that text, everybody believes that one, so here's the story. And I've made reference to this in a number of my presentations. I travel around public speaking and stuff, talking about and I always say, if my understanding of the cosmos is correct, then for the sun to stand still in the sky, that effectively means the earth stopped rotating.
Yeah.
And I say that all the time, but yet if the earth stopped rotating, it seems to me we'd have some major problems of people either flying off the earth or
big ocean issues. Oh yeah, earthquakes.
I mean, and there's the other issue, it's Hezekiah, I believe, makes the sun go backwards.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for the earth to stop and switch rotation, things get really jacked up if we claim to believe the Bible.
Yeah.
And we claim to believe what the scientists who believe they came from monkeys tell us.
Yeah.
Then it gets really confusing and kind of messed up and a pretty seriously jacked up, unbelievable story. However, if you come from your perspective, and again, I'm sitting on your side of the chessboard right now looking at this going, wow, that's real easy if the earth is stationary.
Yeah, that was one of the first things I thought of was the Joshua story. What was it? Killing the entire army with a jawbone of an ass or something like that. Where he asked, he wanted the sun to stay in the sky so he could keep fighting. And from an enclosed world standpoint, that becomes so unbelievably easy because really you just hit a pause button because you could have the sun stay in the sky for as long as you wanted. Wouldn't change anything.
And it wouldn't affect the earth. If the sun and moon are the ones that are moving and the earth is stationary, then you wouldn't have the earthquakes, the loss of gravity, or the seas or any of that.
But if it's just part of the upper system, if it's just part of the upper light show, you hit pause, nothing happens on the ground. But yeah, if it's a globe in a full-blown solar system, you hit pause, the things that would happen. I mean, the oceans would, careen over all these continents and there'd be huge earthquakes. It would be awful. But yeah, the enclosed system works beautifully.
Yeah, and I can see it now because, it's the Christians that the scientists always look at and say, you're a bunch of knuckle-dragging lowbrows. You used to think the earth was flat.
Yeah.
You guys are,
there you go. Yeah.
When you say flat earth or enclosed, you're an idiot. So, but yet Christians pride themselves in saying, well, they believe the Bible. Well, okay, then I read a bunch of scriptures at the top of the show, talking about the earth is fixed. And I'm saying this to myself because I'm still a hollow expanding earth guy, globe guy. So I've got myself in a bit of a quandary here. The gerbil on the wheel of my head's running so fast that smoke's coming out of my ear. But, but then you have we as Christians, we believe in the return of Christ and that every eye is going to see him. Well, how does that work
How does that work on a globe? Yeah, but in an enclosed system, I brought that up to my mother, cause, she was, even though she's a devout Christian, she believes whatever, the modern version from the church. And I said that to her. I said, look, I go, if he's supposed to come back and everyone in the world sees him at the same time, how does that happen on a globe? It doesn't. But in an enclosed system, Again, very, very easy to do, and it makes way more sense. Also with the Tower of Babel story, which I dug into.
Yeah, if, for the sake of the listeners out there who may not have seen it, which clue is that?
That was
the story on that.
That was clue 8, creative force.
Oh man, we don't have time to go in. We got 7 minutes left. That one was fantastic because.
Well, thank you.
I do a lot of research on the character of Nimrod and Tower of Babel and things like that. And when I listened to your parable, because kind of what you did there was a little parable.
Yep.
For those of us who know the story, it was very, very obvious. Oh, he's talking about Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
Brilliant and very, very well articulated. So, but then you have other things, apocalyptic scriptures talk about the sky receding like a scroll. Mm-hmm. Which again, if we're looking at basically a stadium superdome, like the Dallas football stadium, I mean, it just opens up. But how does that work in a
globe?
Or a globe or a universe that, Stephen Hawking would have us believe.
Exactly. And it's rolled up, in scripture the same way that it's laid out in scripture. Like it's laid out like a canopy and it's rolled up like a scroll.
Yeah. Like
they're pretty consistent, all the way across the board, in my opinion.
I mean, look, the text says what it says. All I can do is say, well, do I believe it or not? And, at this point, a lot of my world view, globe view, I mean, when you look at the government, we are thoroughly indoctrinated. I mean, instead of saying world leaders, I mean, everything's global.
Yeah.
The global summit or, global warming or, global this, global that, everything's global. Like they're always getting they're constantly reinforcing globe.
Yep.
Everywhere you go. So everything you see now, your perspective is a globe. So, I'm still on that page. I'm an expanding Earth.
That's okay.
I'm holding on with my fingernails right. But I have to say, man, you are making me think. And that's what I've always tried to encourage both on my Facebook channel as well as a friend of mine, Doug Hamp, and I have a show called Quest for Truth where we try to encourage the dialogue. We don't have to agree, but let's talk about it. Without labeling everybody a heretic or a nut job or, all the name calling, let's have the discussion. And, I appreciate you coming on and you know what? I really appreciated that you put your email and phone number.
Yeah.
On, like, hey, everybody, take pot shots at me. Here I am.
It was mostly just to, not just to get a dialogue going, but to, let's say, look, I'm not gonna hide. This is, I'm trying to avoid, it's like, look, I'm about as legit as you can get. If there's something else I can do to be more legit, please tell me.
But, in fact, shill, I heard you're a shill.
I'm supposedly a shill now. But that's, again, it's strictly just an internal argument between the true flat earthers and me, who's more of an enclosed world guy. And I totally understand their point. I'm not gonna fight with them, which is, shill is supposed to discredit people, and I'm not gonna discredit them. It's like, look, they're part of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. And if they think I'm ruining their movement, fine. They can think that. I'm never gonna say a discouraging word.
Well, I mean, there are people who are saying the same thing about me right now because I talk about all kinds of different subjects and the people rally behind you if they agree with you, And when I started posting on Facebook, stuff about flat or enclosed earth, they're like, no! Talk about that! We use you as a reference for this other stuff and now they're all gonna say you're crazy and then we're crazy and everybody's crazy.
Yeah, and that goes to show you how big it is. It's the only conspiracy that even conspiracy guys get ostracized for.
Well, there's a ton of questions that I didn't get to and that are all over my Facebook. How can people, I'm going to just get myself off the hook now.
All right.
Contact you, because if they have questions, like, why go through me? They can contact you directly, right?
All right. Yes, please do. So please, before you email me or call me, I appreciate that people are calling me after they only watch one clue, but please watch the 11 clues. And if you still have questions, please email me at msargent23@comcast.net. Don't text me. This is a landline. It's not going to go anywhere. Don't comment. I don't have a Facebook page or a Twitter account or anything like that. Just email me the questions or call me on the phone and I will answer what I can. But I'll answer this phone until it gets too much.
Then, who else would you recommend? I mean, we've thrown a few names around here, and I'm asking this for myself also because, I said, this is all brand new to me, and I do consider myself a researcher, and by that I want to research what you guys have said, see if I can poke holes in it.
The same guys, Eric Dubé has got some good stuff out there. Hi, Eric. One day we'll be friends and we'll laugh about this. At least I hope so. His stuff is more sciencey. It's pretty good. Matt Boylan, otherwise known as Math Powerland, otherwise known as the NASA channel on YouTube. A guy named My Perspective on YouTube. He has some wonderful three-dimensional stuff that's going around. Still, if you want to see some really, really interesting stuff about the moon, I recommend Crow 777, CRROW 777. And really, other than that, you just look up Flat Earth on YouTube and do a search for this year, and you'll be amazed at the amount of stuff that's come out.
Well, and that's crazy. I mean, this has never been discussed, at least that I'm aware of in any kind of serious sense by anybody. But now you got Obama and stuff. And this is what kind of gets me because you have George Bush saying, let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories regarding the events of 9/11. In other words, shut up, don't even bother looking into it.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you got Obama basically saying the same thing about flat Earth. It's like, really? Why would you even give it that much credibility?
Yeah. He mentioned that in more than one speech, and I was going, oh, great. Do they have an algorithm that could actually see some of this stuff coming in down the road? Because literally 2 months ago is when I woke up and decided that I was going to, get off the sidelines and get involved in this. And 2015, for whatever reason, there's 1,000% more stuff out there now about this. And it's actually becoming a legitimate topic.
Yeah.
Which it never was. It was literally just the most horrible, insane thing to even consider. And now we've gone past the part of, is it insane for most people to the point where, okay, is it possible? Could we be in an enclosed world?
Well,
absolutely.
We got 30 seconds left, so I just want to thank you for coming on. It was very short notice. I contacted you I think yesterday.
Yeah, yesterday.
Yeah, sure, man, I'll do it.
Yeah, sure.
So, hey, thank you for coming on, and everybody else, be sure to check out his videos, and his contact information is at the end of the videos also, so you can look into it a little bit more deeper and ask all the questions you want. That's all the time we have for tonight. Thank you guys so much for listening to the show project. Good night, everybody.